going to reign here as long as he wants. I think these people realise that they've got something special. They've got some broken down old politician as a president. They've got this wonderful man who's waited 70 years for this job, and he's, in my view, he's doing a brilliant job.
There's a lot of people living in the world. There's nearly 8 billion people, but you will not go to one workshop in any other country of the world where you'll find something like this.
Welcome to Royal Exclusive from Sydney in Australia. I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor. With me, of course, is Arthur Edwards. And today we've had a full day of engagements for the King and Queen here in Sydney. Now, Arthur, I've had a cracking day, all right? I was at the church and I saw the King and Queen and the enormous, huge amount of people that came out to welcome them. You were at the Legislative Council where the King, we got to hear for the first time speak when he was in Australia. What was your highlight of the day?
Highlight of the day was the walkabout afterwards, to be honest with you, because he actually engaged with the people and they were crazy to see him, and there was a huge crowd there. Been there a long while, over hours waiting for him. And he went over and embraced it, as he always does, shook hands with them. And there was one woman, she was absolutely screaming with delight to see him, you know. There was a very few people. I mean, there must have been 100 yards along the crowd there, and he just did about 2 or 3 minutes. But it was great to see him back doing that. And, you know, first time I photographed him as our king and King of Australia, and they made reference to that. He made a quite short speech, but mentioned that, of course, you know, he loves coming here, and then he made a presentation of an hourglass. But before he made the presentation, he gave a hint of what it was when he said, you know, this is to show anybody making a speech going on too long, you can use this, and he unveiled it. And he unveiled it like Tommy Cooper would, you know, and it was quite funny. And there was the hourglass, and of course everybody was so amazed. It was a very lovely present. It's the sort of thing, you know, no one ever think of except him, and it was quite unique. And then he tipped it over to start the sand running, and I thought that was lovely. And
he got a bit of a laugh, didn't he, when he made the joke? I mean, in that speech, he also said that he was here to renew a love of this country. Yeah. He said that he wanted to renew a love of this country and its people for who I've cherished for so long. I mean, he's telling people in Australia, I'm so happy to be here, I'm enjoying myself and I want to see you. But in response, as you pointed out there was a chance for him to meet the crowds outside the legislative chamber, wasn't there? Yeah. Was he meant to be doing that? I mean, was that a surprise that he went out there?
Well, the thing is, I think we got the feeling because, you know, I've never known him actually wave to the crowd when he could possibly go over, and he always does that. And I was quickly over there, but he's very, very tightly surrounded by security. But I mean, I've got one cracking picture which I've, you know, made my day really. And I must say this, you know, he never ever lets you down. You know, one thing working with our king now, he knows that you've got a job to do, and he does his very best at some stage to get your picture. The Queen was the same, the late Queen was the same. She knew you had to get a picture, and she always, at one stage, she'd give you one of her beautiful smiles, and you knew you was home and host. And this was him back to the many times I've been here to Australia. But he looked, you know, I thought a little tired, but then he's had a long journey, you know, like we all have, and I know what it's like getting used to the time change and you know, the body clock. And I imagine, you know, if he was awake 2 o'clock in the morning like we all were, I imagine he was...
he was probably rehearsing his speech, Arthur.
Well, probably
was,
up
all night rehearsing his speech.
Well, actually, yeah, he delivers brilliant speeches. But no, it was all in all, you know, it was a short programme this morning, but I think the people turned out in their hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great way to kick off, you know, what is a kind of shortened tour. It's a great way to kick it off. I was at the church service where the King and Queen, because we had to split up and cover different events. Yeah. I was at the church service, and there was a few protesters. They were far away. They were quite unpleasant. I think there was about 9 or 10. They didn't particularly like journalists turning up, but they were, you know, soundly out-cheered by the amount of people that were supporting the King and Queen. Now there was after the church service, there was a huge walkway where they got to walk down and meet so many fans. Some of them are fans of this show. I spoke to at least 2 people who said that they've been enjoying our show, so that's great that people are enjoying what we have to say. But there were so many people there. There was one fella who said that he cheekily said to the king, "Oh, will you be surfing on Manly Beach this year?"
Yeah.
And he said, "If I was a little bit younger, maybe." There was another lovely girl that gave him a picture of a kangaroo. And it just brought a lot of happiness to the people who had travelled out there. We estimated around about 1,000 people.
That's
but
right
at the end, and he does this all the time. In the last couple of years, I always get this with the king. He's just about to get into the car, and away from where lots of people had got in and queued up, were standing there on this walkway waving their flags. Other people who had heard that the event was happening had crowded around at the top of the road, kind of drowning out the noise of the protesters. And the king and the queen decided, we better go speak to those people as well, and went over and shook lots of people's hands. So I think it's really, well, how important do you think it is that not only have we heard him talk and express his renewed love of the country, but also people are now actually getting to meet this guy, or meet the king and the queen, and give them a warm welcome. What would that mean for the king to see the welcome he's received?
Well, for the first time when I saw him today, and I saw the crowd, and the way they were so enthused when he walked across to them. I think the Republican movement in this country took a bit of a setback today.
I think they took a beating, I would say. They took an absolute beating, because there were so many more monarchy fans.
They're hard to beat Australia. In my view, they took a really big setback. And I was so confident that he's going to reign here as long as he wants. I think these people realise that they've got something special. They've got some broken down old politician as a president. They've got this wonderful man who's waited 70 years for this job, and he's, in my view, he's doing a brilliant job. And it's his first visit since he's king, and they know that, and they turned out in their hundreds to see him.
I'm very, very happy that King Charles has come. It's a very significant visit because it's the first reigning king to have ever set foot in Australia since the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788. It's extraordinary. So I think we shouldn't underappreciate the significance of his visit.
I'm a big supporter of the monarchy, and I'm a dual citizen. We came out here as 10-pound poms when I was six years of age, and settled in Victoria first, and then came to Sydney when I was probably about 19. I've always loved the monarchy, and I've not always been a big supporter of Charles, but I certainly am, now. What are you going to do? He's come out here, he's got cancer, he's paused his treatment, and he's here. He came to Australia, the first realm. Going to turn out for that.
There is a divide in Australia. There are some people who don't really admire King Charles for a range of reasons, which I won't go into, but nevertheless it's not about the person, it's about the institution, the monarchy. So, and I also think that those people who want to attack King Charles don't actually understand the value of the crown as an institution.
They've really, the only people who don't know they're over is Harry and Meghan. They're finished, and they haven't helped themselves. Publishing a book, Spare, that's going to be out there now, haunting him for his days. He's got all those interviews, he's got that Netflix docudrama. It was foolish, and the British public will never welcome them back because of the way they disrespected the late Queen Elizabeth. That mock curtsy on that Netflix documentary was disgraceful.
You mentioned about whether he looked tired, or because there is this underriding issue that the king does have cancer. He is committed to come on this tour. Yeah. He's adamant that he was going to come down under, and I think he looks quite energetic. He seems like he's on top of his game today. We'll see more of him later this week. But I did see that his doctor was here, Arthur.
Oh yeah, always a doctor travels with him, but this year it's a professor.
Yeah.
And obviously he's in this amazing city of Sydney where, if anything that was needed, he'd get it, and there would be no question. And Australia is one of the greatest parts of the Commonwealth, and he knows that. Well, after all, he came to school here. He came as a young prince before he was married. He came here with Diana. I remember the tour was for 5 weeks. I've been here. I've been everywhere with him. I've been all over all the deserts. Just amazing places, and it always got this great enthusiasm, and I saw that same enthusiasm today, this feeling that they come here to see me, and I'm going to try and see as many of them as I can. Now the walkabouts are not long because his schedule is tight, and but they were great. And the walkabout started in Australia. The Queen did it, first one, and so
we're not allowed to call them walkabouts. Did you know about that? No, it's called meeting the people.
Oh, well.
They say that apparently, although the idea that walkabout was invented during those trips, the term kind of walkabout is used for a different meaning in Australia. Obviously, we know what that means. It is a different meaning, but it's this tour. They're saying that they don't call them walkabouts; they call it meeting the people, which is which.
Well, after he had his walkabout, he met the people. But we will know him as that, and always know because that was the name it was given when the Queen did her first one. And then when that was the so all right, I won't call it a walkabout in future.
No, I'm happy to call it a walkabout. It's definitely a walkabout, isn't it? It's a silly idea to call it meeting the people. It's a walkabout.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, but the people here, always turn out for them. And even when he was, when he came on his own after Diana and he parted company, people still turned out for him. But this time he comes our king, and that's something special. I mean, I never thought I'd be working with him as a king. I thought our Queen was going to live forever, our late Queen. But sadly, it wasn't. It was his turn, and he's done a brilliant job so far.
I was reading an article in the Australian press this morning where the author of Schindler's Ark has written a piece about the King's visit, and he talks about what the King represents is a kinship, a friendship, a kind of a history between this great nation and Great Britain. Celebrating the fact that there is a link between these countries. Although Australia is like a modern country, it's moved on a lot since 200 years ago. Yeah. We're celebrating the bicentennial of the New South Wales Legislative Council. Right. We have moved on quite a lot. It's a very vibrant country. There is still that link between Great Britain and Australia, and the King really kind of defines that, right?
Yeah, but Thomas Keneally, one of the chap you're talking about, he's a very, very noted Republican here. And I'm glad to see he softened his tone, because for many years he was campaigning for a Republic and a president. And it seems that he's now appreciating what this man's done for this country, the visits he's made here. Not just, this is quite a short visit, but normally it's weeks and 10 days at least. And when we came for the Commonwealth Games, and he embraced it, and came for the Commonwealth, the government in Brisbane, he embraces it. He just gives everything to it. I'm just so pleased he's made the transition, not only in Britain, which I think he has, but now in Australia.
Following the King's engagements today, we were given exclusive access to go see Jim Frecklington and witness the royal coach he is putting the finishing touches to at his workshop in Sydney.
Matt, what we're looking at is a new coach that I've made especially for His Majesty the King. In London, there hasn't been a new coach made for a king since 1761, and that of course was the Gold State coach. But I've always wanted to make something very special for His Majesty to commemorate his reign. So this is the vehicle that has taken me now just on 6 years to make.
When they see this finding on the streets, hopefully in years to come, for the streets of London, what are the most special elements of this?
Well, what I try to do is make these coaches different to they've ever been made before, and I try to make them as time capsules of British history. In the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, I have 100 pieces of historic material from old buildings, old ships, old aircraft, all to do with your wonderful country going back almost 1,000 years. But in this particular coach, I actually have images of all the different kings and queens who've ruled Britain since 1066. I've got 42 wonderful images that have been hand-painted in Britain by one of Britain's finest portrait artists, and that'll be something different than it's ever been done before. One of the most important parts of the coach is the crown, and the former Dean of Westminster Abbey, he was very generous in donating timber from that wonderful building that they started to build in approximately 960. That's probably the most special part of this vehicle, and as you can imagine how many stories that has to tell over all those years. And that's been carved up in Lincoln in Britain by one of Britain's finest wood carvers. And but in this coach, as I say, it'll have other material, not only from Britain, but also I've got to have some of the Harbour Bridge. Now, our wonderful Harbour Bridge is really one of the great icons of man-made icons of Australia. And 79% of the seal in that wonderful bridge was brought out here from England. So I'm actually incorporated some of the steel from that bridge. But in 1983, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, she came to Australia, and I was very privileged to fly out here with her on that occasion for the opening of the Sydney Opera House. Well, we actually have certain pieces from the Opera House to honour Her Majesty as well.
But it's not just, you know, a connection with the British monarchy. You're obviously a proud Aussie.
I'm a very proud Australian, but I've been very fortunate in my life to work for the British Royal Household. I started working in the Royal Mews just on either 51 or 52 years ago. Working at Buckingham Palace was probably one of the great experiences of my life. And I've always had the highest regard for not only Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, but also our present King. He's doing an exceptional job. And I thought something special should be made to commemorate his reign, and something that can go on and be used for hundreds of years to come, and have a vehicle that they can ride in safety. They take me a long time to build, and I suppose many people wonder why I like making these vehicles. Well, it's something that no one else in the world does. You know, there's a lot of people living in the world. There's nearly 8 billion people, but you will not go to one workshop in any other country of the world where you'll find something like this.